Anyway, the question was, what account in your income statement does a recount affect? And the items are none, inventory adjustment recounts, or whatever account the recount function is mapped to. We're at about 50-60% voted. 80% are saying inventory adjustment, 23% are saying whatever account the recount function is mapped to.
Okay.
So we'll close the
And
poll
guess what?
and share.
Okay. The answer is everybody's right. In your software, we have a mapping tool under your setup, under location settings, and in the location settings there is a map. There are several mapping tools in here that simply allow you to identify where you want to apply these registry accounts to the ledger accounts. So by default, when we send your software out, we've mapped your inventory recount expense to inventory adjustments recount. Probably would recommend that they stay there, but if you definitely wanted to move it to a different account, you're welcome to do that by selecting the account off of the list. What this does then is in your general ledger, anytime we do an inventory recount, the software is going to capture that on your income statement under the inventory adjustment recounts. This is going to capture, although it's an expense, it's going to capture inventory counts up, which is growth, or inventory counts down, which is shrinkage. In this case, you're seeing a negative $79,000 expense to my general ledger, which means that's all inventory growth. A negative expense in this case is going to represent an income. So really and truly, inventory recounts are just like finding or losing money is really what it amounts to. If you count an inventory item that cost you $10, if you count it down by one, you just threw $10 into the wind. If you count an inventory item that cost you $10 up by one, then you found a $10 bill. So essentially think of it as finding or losing money. And I must express to everybody, because a lot of people really don't pay attention to where does the money go. They just go do the inventory recount back here, not knowing that every time that happens, that is affecting the general ledger. So simply stated, folks, it's going to be essentially how much you paid for the item times the recount quantity. So in this case, as you guys can see, if I do a recount, whatever number I change, if I go to 177, I just lost $2.15. If I go to 179, I just found $2.14. So really and truly, your recounts are like finding or losing money, and they're very important. As long as you're paying attention to the general ledger. If you're not, then you're not really affecting much of anything else. You're just monitoring your quantities. While we're on the inventory item, let's talk about returns. And Jeff, I have it noted here for a poll question before we go into returns.
Yeah. So the question is launched, so you can answer, and the question is it possible to return materials from a specific batch of an inventory material? Yes or no, it returns based on FIFO. 80% said yes, and 20% said no.
Okay, so let's take a look at that, how your returns would work. All right, on an inventory item, we have returns. If I use the simple method to do a return, in this case I have 178 of these items in stock. If I'm saying they're just not selling and I want to return 78 of them, the 78 that I'm going to return is going to use FIFO again, first in, first out. So the 78 that I'm going to return is going to come from the oldest that I have on the shelf. Although I have the advanced option again, which takes me back to the batches. So if I wanted to return 78 out of this batch, which would be the oldest batch, and as you can see, is a different pricing, then I would bring that batch up and return the 78 out of this batch. So I can return items against batches. This recount and return against batches is if it looks a little difficult, it really isn't, and it really does help keep the accounting right. It helps keep your credit slips right, the amount on the credits. Okay. Now, if that's not the one I wanted, because this would be the same if I did the simple method, because these are the oldest. The 78 I would return would come out of this at $1.52. But what if I wanted to return the ones that cost me $2.90? Then I would want to return the 78 out of that batch, which is a fairly substantial difference from the FIFO, the way FIFO would do it. So the returns do allow you to return out of batches. If that's, something that you think would help you, it would certainly help in the accounting arena. If not, you can use the simple method, understanding that it is going to use the FIFO method. Okay? So returns can be done out of batches, meaning you can select specific items that were purchased at different pricing to do the returns. That'll make a big difference when you process your credits. Okay? Let's go back to the slide because there's a few points I want to make on the returns. Okay, enter the return quantities. Returns by default will use FIFO, again meaning first in, first out. You can use the advanced option to return items that apply from a batch. Return items will be moved to the purchases return items under the supplier you made the purchase from. On the other hand, return items that do not have a supplier associated, which would usually be recounts, okay, will be listed under the supplier none. Let me show you what I mean by that so you understand. If I do returns to an item under purchases, those items will end up under items to be returned and underneath the specific supplier. If I did a recount on an inventory item or did not have a supplier associated, those items are going to go under none because the software doesn't know whose return bin to put them under. So you will have scenarios where I can't find that item, and here's a prime example right here. I returned an item that did not have a supplier on it, so the software says, I don't know who. So I do have the ability, okay, to push this through a credit slip, and I do have the ability to manipulate the supplier when I process the credit. I bring this to your attention because several people will ask, well, I know I bought that part from this supplier, okay, but it's not showing up in their return bin. I encourage you to make sure to go look at the none before you go in and start adding found items and making other adjustments. So always try to look to none as the supplier if you're not finding the specific item you're looking for. And again, you will have the utilities to move that from none to the specific supplier in the process of processing the return credit slip. Keep some of those tools in mind. The last item on the list is going to be purchases. Okay, simply stated, on any item, you have the ability or the utility up here to select purchase. Purchase, although, is going to move whatever quantity you enter to be purchased to a supplier. Again, my default supplier is on, but I can change this. I can buy from anybody I want. And I can either apply this value, so if I do one, I can create a new purchase order from right here, or I could apply it to an existing purchase order if I had one listed. So you can manually send items to a purchase order one by one, or you could do it to add an item to a purchase order that's already existing. So purchase is going to send the item to a purchase order. All right, so there's some of the control tools on the inventory item. I want to then move actually into inventory reorders. Okay, we want to spend a little bit of time on this. I'm sure a lot of you are receiving your inventory manually, like I was showing you back here. You would go into a specific item and select receive. If you've got 100 items on that order, you're going to be locked up in the office for a little while, and you've got 100 opportunities to make a mistake, either a quantity or a price. It's there if you would like to use it. But like I say, it takes a lot of manual entries to process. So let's talk a little bit about inventory reorders. Inventory reorders can be processed either from the setup side, from the inventory materials by using inventory reorders, or they can be processed from the utilities inventory search to run inventory reorders. Works the same way, however you want to go about it, it doesn't matter. When I select an inventory reorder, okay, it's going to bring some factors into play. One is going to be, who are you going to buy this from? And the other is going to establish your low and high order quantities. I want to briefly just talk about those for a second before we process an order. Inventory items would best be used for the reorders by identifying a default supplier. Who do you go to first? Additionally, your low and high order quantities have an impact on your reorders. Low order, as most of you would know, is going to identify when I get down to this in-stock value, then I want to reorder this item. When I order the item, I want 10 on the shelf. So the software is going to take the high order minus the in-stock value. Bad example here, but I'll bring another one up. So it will tell me how many to order to always get my in-stock level back up to the 10. Other factors that are involved in this are going to be items on work orders and items on orders, which are all going to be part of the reorder process. Let's take a look at how we process an inventory reorder. Now, the reason that the item is bringing this back to the reorder is because I've selected it in the background. I can then identify a profit center, a service category, type, you know all the search parameters. The way I usually redo my orders would be simply to go in by supplier. Because on my list, I don't want parts that I buy from Napa or CarQuest. I only want the parts that I buy from this supplier. Again, whatever combination of parameters I have up above, I can refresh my search, and now it's going to bring up all the items under the oil, lube, and maintenance category where this supplier is set as the default. Even though items are not in a reorder status, this item is not in a reorder status because I have 178 of them and I only want 10 on the shelf, it is going to bring it forward to the list. Any items that have scenarios where they are on a work order are going to be highlighted. So we're going to make those stand out so you can see right here, I've got 11 in stock, but 2 of these are on an existing work order. So wherever you see that highlight, just hover over and it'll give you a status on that item, what's on the work order. This part of the screen, okay, is really just to identify what you're searching for. What are you searching for? Okay. So Jeff, let's stop here. I think you've got another poll question you want to put up on the screen.
Yeah, so is it possible to do reorders based on historical sales of the material? Yes or no? So we're at about 75% voted, so we'll close it up. And 82% said yes, and 18% said no.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at that answer because we're going to walk right over that. Once I get my list of items up based upon the parameters, okay, remember I have the ability to go in on this list, highlight any item, I can edit that item. So I can make changes if I want to make changes to the inventory record itself. I have the ability to remove an item from the list, or I can refresh and create a new search. We talked about our column choosers last time we were together, and don't forget, you can still organize any of these items by your header columns. Move to the second list. Okay. On the second list, this is where we start talking about some of the utilities. Again, I can organize by column headers. I've got an action menu group that allows me to reset my columns, export to Excel, to print, or I can even email this list to my supplier. Okay, I can take a single item and I can go in and do an edit to that item from here. Okay, I can say do not order. In other words, watch, this item says order 1 because it's in a reorder status. If I don't want to order that item, I'll click that box and it says order 0. I can make changes and then I can go back and reset single items or reset all items back to their original state. Here's the beauty, guys, under the calculation column. Under the calculation column, I have the ability to tell my reorder to use the available quantity, so everything will be based on the available quantity, or I can tell my reorder list to use the in-stock quantity, which could be different, as you see on this air filter line, because I've got a couple of those on, they're basically on work orders. So I can use either of these to set the criteria. Can I use sales history? Only if you want to. Here I've said don't use it. If I want to use sale history, then I just click include sales, and it's always going to default back to the previous month. So in this case, under sales, it would identify any sales from the previous month. You can see my business isn't doing real good here. But I can expand this to any point in time. So I can go back to last quarter. Doesn't matter. I can even bring in more sales history, and if I select more sales history, you're going to get 2 extra columns. Again, everything is based on this date range. So under sales, I'm looking back at, and you can point over and see the time frame. Sales last 3 periods would be the previous 3 months. So here you can see I go back to November of 2016, or I can go back a full year. So when I'm doing my reorders, your seasons will have some play in that, and it's all right on your screen by simply selecting which box you want to look at. It will remember these settings next time you process an order. So however you leave this reorder list is how it's going to come back next time you go back in to do your reorders. So just remember, you can include sales history, and it's a great tool. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next screen. And on the last screen, all it's going to do is ask me what supplier. Again, I can buy them from anybody I want, and I can either use a new PO, or if I had an existing PO, it would be listed, and I could append these new items to that. Okay, let's go ahead and create this purchase order. So right from the reorder screen, if I click on create, it asks me to verify. When I verify, it takes me right to the purchase order. So what happened is an inventory list I just did turned in to a purchase order. Okay, and basically here it is for me to work with from this point forward. Again, I do have tools. All I'm going to do is just make sure it's right. If I'm good, I'm going to close it up. I'm going to go on about my business. To access that purchase order, I go to Purchases, Purchase Orders. I can look by supplier, or I can look at all purchase orders. However you want to do it. I'll look at all, and here I've got 2 purchase orders on the same supplier. If I open up this purchase order, that's the one I just processed. From the purchase order screen, I have several options, okay? In the line item group, I can take a single item, I can view and make corrections if I change my mind to quantities, purchase order, supplier, any of the above, any of the editable fields. Or I can delete that item right off. If I say, no, I don't want that item, I can delete that item off. No problem. Under the action menu group, okay, I can select an item. Again, I can view, I can delete, okay, but that's really all I have at this point. Once I get the purchase order with the right information on it, I would normally encourage you to mark it as placed, which is just like the postman picking up a letter. Once you've marked it as place, you then normally would want to take that purchase order and send it to your supplier. Marking it as placed does not allow you to really change the order because the supplier already has it. When the order actually comes in, then you have the ability to reconcile to the supplier invoice. Reconciliation will be to go in and make sure that you ordered for, and notice I can edit the received quantity. I can edit the returned quantity. I can edit the back order quantity. So I'm going to use a similar example. I ordered 10. What if I happen to receive 12 and I want to return 2 because I really only want 12? Or I can take an item I ordered 4, okay, and I can go right over here. If your supplier does back orders, I can back order 4, okay? So keep these things in mind. I have the ability to identify received, returned, back ordered, and I also have the ability to edit the cost and the core. Once I get all this information in here matching up to the supplier invoice, which I could do one at a time, and then receive items one at a time, which is really no better than what you can do from the inventory item, I can select multiple items and receive the selected items. It's asking me to enter the supplier invoice, or I can go through this entire order making sure everything matches up, and I can come in here and say receive all. The system is going to ask me for the supplier's invoice number. So once I enter that, if I want to do them all at one time, I can do it. The purchase order's been processed. Once the purchase order's processed, then all of those inventory items have automatically been updated, and I will see a supplier invoice in my system, okay, for that order. So all of these things become automatic, okay? All of these things become automatic. So your purchase orders and inventory reorders in review, by default, set up a supplier and your values. The reorder list has search parameters. Usually, best option is by supplier. Your reorder steps in level 1, level 2, and level 3 of processing the purchase order.